What's shakin' bacons? Welcome to the Bacon Awards. These are based on the films that I have seen this year, so there are going to be some left out. I don't have the time, unfortunately, to see every single movie. These are based on the ones I have seen and I have rated. We are basically going to go through and assign awards, some of them slightly dubious, to the best movies, the worst movies, etc. So these are our categories. We have guiltiest pleasure, most surprising, most disappointing. Then, of course, we're going to finish up with worst film and best film. I had fun putting this list together. I hope you guys enjoy it. Before I get started, however, let me just make a quick note and say, patrons, thank you again so much for supporting me on Patreon. I have a special bloopers video for 2018 if you have not seen that yet. That is up just for you guys. Thank you so much for supporting me in this channel. It means a lot. And patrons, you also get a full tabular roundup of my ratings for this year, so you can kind of see the scale as it's gone for the films that I've seen this year. That is also available to you on Patreon as of now. If you're interested in seeing my reviews on each of the specific movies that I talk about in this video, I will have them all linked below. One last thing I would like to note, this is going to be spoiler free, so please do not worry about me spoiling anything for you if you have yet to see these movies. I'm going to try and keep this short and sweet. So let's get started. Let's start with the Guiltiest Pleasure Award. And as a category explanation, the Guiltiest Pleasure Award I think is kind of self-explanatory. However, these are the movies that are just so bad that they're good. Or they're bad, but you can't help but like them anyway. Or they're over the top ridiculous, but you end up liking them regardless. You know what I'm saying? Our runner-up for Guiltiest Pleasure is Ready Player One. Now, Ready Player One is not a film that I think is bad at all. I just think it is on my guilty pleasure list because this film was purely based on a book and on a premise that Steven Spielberg was going to be hauling in them nostalgia dollars from us, and boy did it work. This movie was a really, really fun film. The best way I can describe it is it's like going to an amusement park of memories and video games, and it's just a really great watch. It just works. Granted, it's flawed and cringy at times, but it is straight up fun. Especially if you're into those newfangled video games and you can't get your head out of the real world. So the first winner for the Guiltiest Pleasure Award is Aquaman! It's absurd. It's Aquaman. It's the most over-the-top, screw it, we're going all out ridiculous with all of the back lore for Aquaman movie that I have seen this year. It is one insane escalated battle to the next. It's like space but underwater. It's intense. Is it ridiculous? Is it full of plot holes? Yes, but boy is it fun. Aquaman is my winner for Guiltiest Pleasure. Our next category is Most Surprising. These are the films that I went into expecting one thing and received another thing. I also have a runner-up for this category, and my runner-up for this one is A Quiet Place. Nothing against John Krasinski, but I honestly wasn't expecting this level of talent from him, and wow, this movie completely took my breath away, and in fact it took away the breaths of everyone else that was in the audience of the theater I was in, because all of us were so absorbed in the story and in the environment that we were afraid to make a sound. This movie was tense and it was emotional, and it's a gut-wrenching story. And if you still have not seen this, I really recommend that you do. This one knocked my socks off. If you have been watching my channel for most of this year, you'll probably know what my winner is in advance. I have to give it to Venom. Venom is probably my winner for this category. I thought that this film was going to be horrible, and I said as much when I did my reactions to the trailers. People got really mad at me for saying that, but again, Sony in the past has had a reputation for giving things away and doing pretty terrible superhero or villain type movies now that we're rolling Venom in. And I was so happily surprised by just how much I liked this movie. Venom ended up being a little cheesy, a little predictable. However, the dynamic between Tom Hardy and his portrayal of Venom, as well as the storyline with how it unfolded, weaving in how the symbiotes came to Earth, was so intriguing to me, and I really, really enjoyed it. I also enjoyed having a movie without Spider-Man. It's nice to have a movie that's not about the good guy in a universe, and it's great to have that dichotomy of fighting the evil within, especially with the idea that it's come from outer space. For me, Venom was my biggest surprise of the year. Next up, we have most disappointing. And I believe that this is probably self-explanatory as well. However, I am defining this as films that I expected more from that really let me down. Of course, we must have a runner-up for most disappointing as well, and quite frankly, I had a hard time picking a runner-up because there were a lot of films this year that were pretty well adapted to fit this category for me. I have to go with Shane Black's interpretation of The Predator 2K18. Boy, oh boy. This film was abundant with useless characters, a plethora of different plot lines and storylines that went nowhere, and a setup for a potentially horrible sequel that nobody needs. This was a really disappointing delivery from Shane Black on this one. I had much higher expectations for this film, especially considering his connection to the prior films, the original films. For him to so drop the ball on this was really disappointing for me, and that is why The Predator is my runner-up for this one. And the winner for this, I really can't give to anything other than the Fantastic Beasts sequel, The Crimes of Grindelwald. This movie had such a messy plot. It wasn't sure whether it was a dark adult film or whether it wanted to be a family movie. It had boring characters, and it had writing that constantly contradicted itself and contradicted the lore that its entire world is based on. In my opinion, J.K. Rowling really needs to write the novels first, have an editor and then a screenwriter translate this into film for her, because this movie was, to me anyway, a mess. There were some good parts of this film, don't get me wrong. I really like Newt Scamander. I liked that they are showing why Grindelwald was such a villain. However, most of this film was just such a straight up, I know I keep saying mess, but I honestly can't think of any better way to describe it. It was just chaotic. And it was a big letdown for me. I expected more from J.K. Rowling. We are coming down to it. We are getting to the worst films of the year, in my opinion. My runner-up worst film of 2018 is probably one that people are going to widely disagree with me on if they've seen it. And that would have to be Annihilation. Annihilation for me was the runner-up because it had so much potential. It had a very strong base in the novels it was purported to be based on. However, because the director decided to interpret it as a dream of the novel that he had, a lot of the finer points that truly make this background story terrifying were completely lost. When you add that into a lack of context due to the way that the film presented the interpretation of the story, as well as a very strange, odd ending that even people who like the film were kind of like, huh? It doesn't make for a great film. So that for me was my runner-up for worst film of the year. My worst film of the year. I will give you a second to guess it. It is Jurassic World 2: Fallen Kingdom. Fallen Kingdom? More like Fallen Franchise. Am I right? Hey! I absolutely hated this movie. It's not often that I want to walk out of a theater. This is the first film in a very long time where I have actually wanted to get up and leave the theater. That is how much I disliked this movie. Holy smokes, did I hate this film. Not even Chris Pratt and the astounding visual effects and renderings in this movie could save or salvage this movie for me. Between the bad acting, the bad writing, the insanely stereotyped character archetypes, the terrible plot, and the insane amount of political messages that they shoved down the throat of the audience, this film hit the bottom of the bucket for me this year. This is my #1 worst film for 2018. And we are coming to my best overall movies of the year. The runner-up best movie for overall of the year is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. This movie really, really blew me away. It was a close tie for best overall runner-up with Spider-Verse and Black Panther, but in the end I had to give it to Spider-Verse. It has such amazing and original visuals and ideas for the story in this. They had a killer storyline and killer character development, both with the main characters and with the villains. There was some very tense, emotional, adult moments in this film, and this film succeeded in completely reinvigorating my enjoyment of Spider-Man, who, to be honest, I was getting a little tired of. We've had so many reboots of the Spider-Man franchise, and this movie actually kind of pokes fun at that as well. Quite frankly, I was getting pretty sick of Spider-Man. Even though I do like the Spider-Man portrayal in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I was getting tired of him. This movie has completely reinvigorated me. I'm stoked. I want to see more of this world. I want to see more of Miles Morales. And if you haven't seen this movie, I encourage you to watch it. It is wonderful. Last but definitely not least, as the best overall movie, in my opinion, for this year, and you've probably guessed it, it's gotta be Avengers: Infinity War. The sheer scope of this film is so impressive to me. I think the Russos did a masterful job of tying in together the entire existing MCU, all of those storylines, all of the villain stories, developing the characters of each throughout the film despite the fact that there were so many in there, staying true to each character, staying true to the villains, actually giving us a side to a villain that I don't think we have actually seen before, not even in Black Panther. This was just immensely impressive to me, and it was also impressive to me that they managed to hide so much of the major spoilers and plot points from leaking for this film, and they didn't really give much away in the trailers, which for me is a big thing because it shows that the studio knows what it's doing, it knows how to market it properly, and it knows how to handle its films with care. It goes the extra step to ensure that the audience is going to receive the full package for what they're paying for. And for me, I have to give Infinity War the best overall movie of 2018. That is it for the Bacon Awards for 2018. Tell me, did you guys agree or disagree with any of my choices for these categories? What would you have picked? You should let me know. If you are interested in joining Patreon and getting access to that extra content that my patrons currently get, please be sure to check that out. I have a link to my Patreon at the end of this video and in the description box below. And don't forget, if you want to see any of the specific reviews that I have done on each of the movies that I mentioned, links for those will also be in the description box below. I hope you're all doing amazingly. I'm so excited for 2019, and I hope to catch you then.